G'day guys, Shane here. This week what I'm bringing you is a presentation that I did for Novac, the North Virginia Astronomy Club. I was asked to do a presentation on how we take photos with the phones of the stars, what got me into it, a little bit about me, the tools I use. It's really an informative video for anyone who's looking to get into astrophotography with your phone. Here it is.
Okay, well, why don't we get started? Good evening, everyone. This is the inaugural meeting for the smartphone imaging group. This evening, we have Shane Moyston. He's from Australia. He lives about 165 miles north of Melbourne. He's a professional photographer and has a channel on YouTube where he has about 7,000 subscribers. And he does regular shows and presentations there on smartphone astrophotography. So what I'd like to do is we want to keep this fairly informal. If you haven't used Google Meet before, on the side there's if you click on the side on the right hand side, you can see a place where you can post questions, and you're automatically muted and you have to unmute yourself, and you can do that where the people icon is on the right. Just click on your name and you can unmute yourself if you want to ask questions. And we will let Shane introduce himself and talk about some of the things that he does that are relevant to smartphone astrophotography. And that'll kind of break the ice. And then as we go, Shane, you can stop and ask or check in or go to the end. Whatever works for you works for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
That's me. You've already told about who I am. I suppose I'll speak a little bit about, well, thank you for letting me do this, by the way. I haven't done this before. The last few months with YouTube has been kind of ridiculous, but I'll talk about that in just a minute. I suppose what we'll do, I'll run through this. If you have any questions at all, just ask. I don't mind being interrupted. It's totally fine, totally informal. So what I'll do today here is talk a little bit about me. It's probably my least favorite subject to talk about, but at least you'll get some sort of understanding of who I am, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and so forth. We'll talk a little bit about mobile photography, some considerations with the astrophotography with phones, the tools, and the iPhones versus Android. We'll leave that to last because that usually gets heated when I talk to people about that. So my background, many years ago, I was in the army, in the Australian Army. I was an infantry soldier. I taught mechanised infantry, taught people to drive tanks and stuff. And you might think, well, that's not relevant, but it kind of is. So when I'm out taking photos at 2 o'clock in the morning on a winter's morning, it's pretty miserable sort of weather. And I think the army gave me a bit of tolerance to that because I'm usually out there alone in the middle of nowhere doing this sort of stuff. So I think that if you weren't in some sort of military before, I think the company that you keep when you're doing this sort of stuff, and you guys have obviously got a good group there, so you've got a good company, and you can feed off each other's morale, if you like, because this can be, anyone that's been out there taking photos, you know it can be pretty miserable when the ground's frozen under your feet. So I think that's relevant to this. When I left the army, I went to work Xerox and IBM, mainly in the operational service operations field, if you like. So at Xerox and IBM and Mitel and Canon, I was a service operations manager in different capacities in those industries. And what led to going from that into photography was when I was working at IBM. I was on a pay scale, if you like, where if I earned just a few dollars more, I would have been in a different tax bracket, and the tax bracket would have caused me to take home a lot less money. So I worked out a deal there with the fellow that I was working for at the time and said, how about you just buy me some kit and you can pay for it that way, if you like. I'm not sure if you do that sort of stuff over there, but it's pretty common practice here to do that. Anyway, I went out and I found myself my very first DSLR camera, and it kind of went from there. Started taking photos on the Gold Coast, which is where I was from originally, up on the sandy beaches, and now I live in outback of nowhere. And I was doing some like real estate photography and things like that. And the job that I was doing was a pretty intense sort of stressful sort of work. And we came down here one time at Easter to see my sister, my wife's sister, and the carrier that I was with for my phone, as in like cell phone coverage, it was non-existent here. And it was the most peaceful weekend I've had in years. So that weekend I said to my wife, I said, we should move here. And 6 weeks later, we've both given up our work and we moved to literally a tree change to the middle of nowhere. And we haven't left since. It's a great place. We love where we live. But when I moved down here, I started doing professional photography. I don't know if you guys have debutante balls. Is that something that you guys do?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So you know what I'm talking about there then. So I generally do a lot of the surrounding towns, their dead ball photography. I do weddings and corporate work and all that sort of business. And I was doing that for, I still do it now, but I was doing that for a while, and I was always taken by the night sky that we have here because we're so isolated where we are. And I remember going out one night and taking this photo here. This is the very first astrophotography photo I've ever taken in my life. I just read some stuff on the internet about how to do it, went and set up a tripod and shot for 30 seconds, and I was blown away. From that point, I was kind of hooked to do this sort of photography. You can see there that truck or car or whatever it was in the foreground there going past. At the time, I thought that was cool, and now I avoid it like the plague. But I was pretty much hooked with the astrophotography from there. And once I started doing this, and a friend of mine in Melbourne, I taught some photography up here as well. A friend of mine in Melbourne who's also a photography instructor, I was talking to him and we were trying to find a way to do astrophotography for the people in Melbourne. Now, Melbourne is a big city. There's like 6 million people there. It's our capital city in this state. So there's obviously a lot of light pollution there. And what we ended up doing was bringing people up at weekends at a time up to our neck of the woods here and teaching them astrophotography out in our pristine night skies. They're just, we get to put it into perspective, we get about 300 millimeters of rain a year. So it's pretty dry here. And it's pretty rare you even get clouds here. So this kicked off and we kept this going for quite some time. And a few things happened in the agricultural industry, which is where, for those who weren't in when we were having a chat earlier, I'm surrounded by dairy farms. Like, this is very much dairy country here. And like most agriculture around the world, you go through peaks and troughs of, some years it's great and other years it's not so great. And at the time we started doing this, it was a time of in our town where things weren't great. The milk price wasn't very good and water was very expensive. And so we were hurting a bit. So this helped bring some tourism into town. And soon enough, we started getting a bit of a name for ourselves as a destination for astrophotography. And still now today, we don't do this anymore because of COVID, but we've just started easing restrictions here now. But still, people are still coming up here just before COVID on their own back to take photos of our night sky. So it was kind of cool. So whilst we went through this lull of finance in our town, that we were struggling, the town was struggling, I was looking for other avenues to make some money, and my wife said to me, you need to go and teach people how to take photos with their phones. And at the time I thought, you're crazy. Their phones, for crying out loud. We'll talk about that in a minute. I forgot about this slide. So these are 3 photos that I've taken with DSLRs, but I just want to explain what sort of work that I do. The photo of the excavator, I'm showing you this one. That's probably, I sell these prints as well, and that would be my biggest selling image that I've taken. There's a lot of planning that was in that shot, and we'll talk about that shortly. But there's also a lot of technique with lighting and stuff in this shot. So there's a lot of strobe lighting going on in this shot. If you look close enough at the cab of that tractor, I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm not sure what the resolution is like where you are. Can you see the light in that tractor cab or not? Hello?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can see everyone's on mute. They have to find
Ah,
mute buttons.
I thought for a minute I'd lost everybody. All good. So that cab is lit up with just the iPhone torch. So I had the iPhone torch sitting on the track of the machine, and that was enough light to throw into the cab. The train carriages that are there, those abandoned train carriages, you can see there's a plane that's gone through the sky there up amongst that galactic core. There's a lot of light in this. So there's a lot of planning that was in this photo here with the train. So I think there's probably 7 different light sources that we have in this photo. So mainly was to demonstrate how complex this sort of photo can get. And the one below that with the cactus, that again was just my iPhone torch. So I would take the photo and quickly wave the torch across the top of it, and that's it. I mean, for a 30-second exposure, I may have used that torch for 1.5 seconds, and that would be it. So it's enough light there to do that sort of thing. Where the galactic core is in these photos, so where that line of star is, that's what you guys call it, I'm assuming, the galactic core. That's certainly what everyone that I talk to refers it to as. It's in different parts of the sky at different times of year. So I'll talk about a tool shortly of how I plan these sorts of photos. So when it came to mobile photography, as I was saying before, with the lull that we had in town with the bad milk pricing and the expensive water, we just didn't have much cash in town. And the surrounding towns, there wasn't many people who were spending money. So the pool of customers that I had with photography, for example, was pretty small. And my wife said, teach people mobile photography, because I was doing a lot of just regular photography with my phone on Instagram and things like that. And I started running workshops, just taking photos with your phone, all about composition and different apps and things like that. And it's probably, before COVID, it was probably my biggest earner. Everybody was getting something out of it. I had a massive pool of customers because everybody has a phone. And we were taking some great photos, and people were learning a lot and giving me good reviews and that sort of thing. And then that's when COVID hit. So in March of this year, we've been pretty lucky in this country. We live on an island, for crying out loud. So we're pretty well at arm's length from most of it. We've had a few little like outbreaks, if you like, and we locked down and that sort of business. But where I am, like, we haven't had a case near us for like 400 kilometres, or not 400 kilometres, for our shire, what would you call that? County, maybe, is 400 kilometres square, and we've not had a case here. So we've been pretty lucky in that regard. But nonetheless, we all get treated the same, and we all got locked down. And I thought, how can I continue teaching people mobile photography? I had no intention of starting anything to do with YouTube. And then the iPhone, my phone contract was up, and I ended up going upgrading my phone. And I got this iPhone 11 Pro, and it had that night mode. And that was a bit of a wake-up moment for me. I didn't realise phones could actually take photos of the stars. And that photo there is a photo from the very first YouTube video that I did. I thought, well, I can't teach people to do this in person at the moment, so I'll do it on YouTube. So this is actually a postie bike, what we refer to as a postie bike, how our mail, in town at least, how your mail would be delivered. So strap a heap of bags and stuff to this little 110cc motorcycle and drive your mail all over town. But when these bikes retire from the mail from Australia Post, they sell them, and they're incredibly reliable motorcycles. They get used on farms everywhere. There's nothing to them. You can pick them up and move them around. They're a great all-round sort of bike. So with all of my photography with the astro stuff, I tried to have a subject in the foreground. And in this case, on this video, it was this motorcycle. But when I taught that video, when I made that video and taught you how to take that photo that I'm taking right there, the response from the YouTube community was ridiculous. I don't know if any of you guys play in the YouTube space, but the growth that I've had, it's incredible. It's pretty humbling. this video here now, I think, has been seen maybe 16 or 17,000 times, maybe 20,000 times now. I'm not 100% sure, but the take up has been good. Like the process in taking that photo with your phone, and we'll talk about how I did that in a second. It's been well received, and so many people around the world, including you guys. You wouldn't be sitting here watching this if you weren't doing this. It's been pretty cool. We'll talk about considerations, I guess, for how I plan these sorts of photos. There's different apps. We talk about light pollution, subjects to photograph, and things like that. But the first thing I want to talk about is the apps to find that galactic core. So this is a weir that's near our place, how we control some of the water. And knowing where that galactic core is throughout the year and at different times of the night and stuff, that's the most important part of the planning, besides finding the subject for me. So knowing how that core is going to interact with the subject that I'm photographing is paramount, and we'll talk about an app that I use for that. The next part is the moon phase. This image here, that bright light is the moon. It's about 1/3 of a moon, and it's a lot of light there. This is also taken with a DSLR, this particular phone. We're just talking about the planning and stuff at the moment. And this photo here, it actually adds to the photo. So you can certainly be put off by the moon with these sorts of photos, these astro photos or nightscape photos, depending on where you sit with that terminology. You can certainly be put off by the moon. The moon can certainly damage the photo, if you like, it damage the look that you're trying to achieve. Or in this case here, I think it adds to the photo. And this would be, and I know that it adds to the photo, this would be the probably second or third popular print that I sell, mainly to people who live in irrigation country like what we are here. That water that goes through that photo is an irrigation channel. That's how we water like crops and stuff here. Next thing is light pollution. And the light pollution that I'm talking about here is from other towns. Obviously, that's a plane flying through the sky there. But if you look at that photo and directly underneath that photo on the horizon, you've got that little bit of glow in the middle. There's a little bit more glow to the left-hand side of it, and there's a fairly good glow on the right-hand side. And that's some cloud that's there. And that one that's on the right-hand side, that's a town called Echuca, and that's about 60 kilometers away from here, time-wise, which I think when I talk to American guys, it's because we don't use miles and that sort of business. We use kilometers. That's about 45 minutes drive away from where we are here. There's a little bit of cloud there, but you can see how much light is coming from that town. There's a few different tools that I use to find if I've never been to a location before. I will look at and I'll send an email when we're finished with this with some links to different tools that I use. But one of those tools is Light Pollution Map. It's a website, and you basically punch in where you are, and it'll give you an overlay of different colors and how bad that light pollution is. So I'll give you a link in an email later on. And the next thing is the subject. This is an old motorcycle of mine. And what I find with the subjects in a nightscape photo is the more commonly available that subject is, so the more people see it in its regular daytime environment and lighting and stuff, when you do it at nighttime with the stars and with some light painting, as in putting light onto that subject, the better that photo is accepted. Like the excavator photo that you saw earlier, how common are excavators? They're everywhere, around here anyway, they're everywhere, doing channel work and stuff. But when you put it underneath the stars, people see something that's so commonly seen everywhere, but now it looks totally different. People like that. So like this motorcycle, well, you see motorbikes everywhere, but not necessarily under stars and lit that way. So I find that there's two different ways to deal with a subject in a nightscape sort of a photo. One is lighting the subject like this motorcycle, and the other way is like that with, see the windmill on the left-hand side there of that photo? and the tree line, that's all silhouetted. So sometimes I'll take photos that have got no lighting on the subject at all, and they're just silhouetted against the night sky. And as long as it's a subject that is easily identifiable by the shape of that silhouette, I tend to do that, like dead trees, big rocky outcrops, things like that. I'll tend not to light them at all. But if it's a subject like a machine, like a tractor, motorcycle, car, whatever, I'll usually light that. And the way that I light that, there is a technique around it. And I've done lots of, all the YouTube stuff that I do where I'm lighting a subject, I talk about this. But if you're, if what you guys are looking at right now, if you're the camera and I'm the subject, I wouldn't light the subject from where you are. I would light it from the sides, so the shadows cast across, and it gives more depth to the photo. Hopefully that makes sense. Excuse me a second. It's only like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. Coffee's fine. There's the subject again. Let's talk about some tools and some apps. So from what I understand, the majority of you guys are shooting with iPhone. And we'll talk about iPhone and Android in a second, but these things are cross-platform, what I'm about to talk about. So with the iPhone, if you've got an iPhone 11 onwards, you're going to shoot with the night mode, and I'll talk about different ways that you can do it with different phones that you have. But hopefully I'm not telling you guys to suck eggs here. Hopefully you get something out of this. But the biggest tool that you're going to use as far as night photography goes is your tripod. Now, the tripod that I use in most of my videos is a proper DSLR tripod, mainly because I can stand up behind it taking the photo. But tripods are rated based on the weight that they can carry. So if you're shooting with a DSLR that weighs a couple of kilos, you need a tripod that will handle a couple of kilos. But these things are light as. So pretty much any tripod is going to suit that sort of photo. You're going to need a phone holder, and basically that phone clips into that holder and it goes onto a tripod just to keep everything nice and still. So the difference in shooting with a tripod and shooting handheld is that the computational photography of the device that you're using will shoot longer if it's still. So an iPhone, for example, you can go into night mode. Handheld, the most you'll get out of it is 10 seconds. On a tripod, you'll get 30. So the longer, the better. But we'll talk about that a bit more in a second as well. I always use a torch to light the subjects. This torch here, and doesn't have to be this torch, but the most important thing is it's adjustable as far as brightness goes. So when you're shooting a phone as your astrophotography camera, it's harder to adjust the things that would affect that light. So on a proper camera, you would, if the light was too bright, you might adjust the aperture, bring it down a little bit so it's not bringing in as much light. Whereas on a phone, you can't do that. It's only done with software anyway. So you want to adjust the brightness of the light that you're using instead. And I find that there's a little rechargeable torch that you can adjust the brightness levels. So you shine it once and you check the photo and you go, well, that's just too bright. We'll bring it down a notch. Well, that's not bright enough. You get what I'm saying. It's just easier to do that with a torch than it is to try and adjust anything with the phone, regardless of the app that you're using. Which brings me to apps. So the apps, there's three different, I guess, categories of apps that I use. One is for planning, one is for the shooting, and one is for the editing. And we'll talk about them. So the main app, before, the one that I use the most right now is called Photo Pills, which looks like that. And I've done a screen recording here in a second. I'll show you how it works if you're not familiar with it. But Photo Pills was an absolute game changer for planning for astrophotography, for nightscape photography for me, because it does this augmented reality with using the camera and the software in the app, and you get a nice overlay of the night sky on a subject. It does cost. It costs, I think it's about $15 Australian, so it's probably 35 cents for you guys over there because the exchange rate is just terrible. But in reality, it's probably $7 or $8, $10 or something like that for you guys. But if you didn't want to pay for that app, and if you were going to do this sort of thing regularly, absolutely encourage you to buy that app. It's a fantastic app. It doesn't just do this. It's an all-round photography app. It'll tell you the augmented reality, where the moon's going to rise, where the sun's going to set. It'll help you plan for things like star trail photography to find the northern star or the southern point to find it, to get that nice circle sort of photo. It's a fantastic app. But if you didn't want to do that, you can use Stellarium. Stellarium was what I used to use. It's a desktop program, so you need to install it onto your computer. It's free. And you punch in the town that you're in or the long and lats of where you want to go to, and you can change the time so you can see where the constellations and planets are at that time in that location, which is great. But PhotoPills will do that for you too at that location, and you can plan for that shot. So how I use PhotoPills is I'll go, say I'm driving along the road and I see this tree and I think that's a really good looking character about that tree. When would I come back and take that photo? Because the galactic core moves all through the year. And I'll take PhotoPills out and I'll set it up and just fast forward time, which I'll show you in a second, and go, well, I need to come back in September on the 13th at this time of night, going to be this sort of photo. That's how I plan all of my photos with astrophotography. Whereas with Stellarium, it's kind of like, oh, it might look like this when I get there, maybe. It's better than nothing, but it's nowhere near as good as PhotoPills, in my opinion. So PhotoPills looks like this. This is the user interface once you go in there. I'm only going to show you one feature on this, but you can see there the things that it can do. And it's a very good app. The main thing I use it for is that night AR, that night augmented reality. And when you go into that, this is what it does. So what you're going to see is my motorbike. And this is actually from one of the YouTube videos that I did way back in June or July or something. And you'll see there, as I scroll through the screen, you'll see the time at the top left-hand corner changing. So you can see where the Milky Way, that galactic core, will sit as I fast forward through the time. So you can see there the camera is picking up the bike, and I'll turn just touching and turning. You can see that's 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 7:10, 7:11, 7:37 as the core is going to be there. So you can see how that is just going to be a ridiculously powerful tool in planning this sort of photo. Other apps, well, I'm not going to tell you how to suck eggs. You've got weather apps on your phone, I'm sure you do. If it's cloudy, you're not going to see anything. Don't go. Moon phases, there's a number of apps. Even some weather apps will tell you what phase the moon's going to be and what time of the day it's going to rise and set. PhotoPills will also tell you that with that augmented reality. And you can see on PhotoPills when it's going to sun up, sun down, moon up, moon down, that sort of business. The other tool that is probably not that readily apparent is the different map apps like Google Maps and things like that. And this is just a quick screenshot of roughly where I am. And I use these for when I'm going to locations that I don't know that well. So you just need to understand how that map works in that location. So on this particular map, the roads that are white are generally going to be low traffic roads. They might even be dirt roads. The roads that are yellow on this map are more high use roads. So highways, main thoroughfares, that sort of thing. So if you remember back to the very first astro photo I showed you with that truck going there, that was up there where it says Gunbower. And that's actually on a highway. So you want to avoid that if you can. If you can't avoid it, well, you just got to be mindful that you're probably going to get some traffic in that sort of photo. All right, the shooting apps. This is still iPhone at the moment. We'll talk about this is specific to iPhone. We'll talk about the Android stuff in just a sec. The shooting apps will depend on the device that you have. If you have an iPhone 11 and 12 or 12, only 11 or 12, the SE doesn't do this. You can do the night mode, and if you have something prior to the 11, I'll show you another app now that will do it as well. So this is the night mode in the regular camera app that comes with your phone. I was showing you, this is another video from another YouTube, a screen capture from another YouTube video. What I'm showing you here, the end result photo I'll show you in a second is not taken at this time because the lights that are all over my car there, they're all the video lights from me being out there shooting the YouTube video. But I turn all the lights off and take another photo, but this is the process that I went through. So when you turn that night mode on, it will come on automatically if it's dark enough, and that's what that yellow button is up the top there. It's on a tripod, so I've touched that yellow button, and you can see down the bottom it says maximum 30 seconds. If you saw the shadow then, I wasn't touching the phone. So when you're not touching it, you can set it up on the tripod, set it up, and because you've been touching it, it says 10 seconds max. Just give it a second, and it'll go to 30 seconds, and just touch that button, and it will go through like it's doing right now, and record that, or take that night photo with the computational photography that the iPhones use, which is, for a phone, it's quite good. I'll get to the end of that. There's the photo with the lights turned off from that phone. We'll talk about expectations here. I think it's relevant with this photo. On this particular night, there was a little bit of moon. It was only like a slither of moon. I'm not up on the terminology as far as the phases of the moon goes, but it was enough moonlight there to light up all that you're seeing in the foreground. I didn't light anything else up there. That's just moonlight. But you can see the major stars up in the sky there. There's plenty of star trails on those. Now, I don't know how much work you guys have done with DSLRs, but there's a rule that you employ with manual settings with nighttime photography, with star photography, and that's a rule of 500. And that's, or you can do 600 if you like. Some people even go 300. It really depends on how you want to butter your bread. But basically, you've got 500 divided by your focal length. And on the iPhone, the focal length is an equivalent of 26 millimeters, so it works out to roughly, 19, 20 seconds roughly. And you don't get that option with the iPhone. You've got 10 seconds handheld if it's dark enough, or 30 seconds on a tripod if it's dark enough. That's it. You don't get anywhere in between. You used to, but in an update that they did for some reason, you don't do it anymore. Hence, you've got star trails. So that's, from my point of view, that's a downside of the iPhone shooting night sky. But you've got to set your expectations. This is a sensor the size of my small fingernail capturing stars. And if you were to tell me that 5 years ago you could do this, I would have told you you're lying. It's never going to happen. Ridiculous. You're nuts. But it does. And it doesn't really matter which side of the fence you sit on. I think that's impressive regardless. If you've got a phone that is before the iPhone 11, and this works as far as I can tell, as far back as the iPhone 6, it may even go to the 5, is the Night Capture app, or the Nightcap app. And I've done lots and lots and lots of videos about the Nightcap app on the iPhone 11, on the iPhone 10, using different modes. This is another screen recording from another YouTube video that I've done. So when you're taking these nighttime photos, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with things like the exposure triangle with aperture and shutter speed and ISO. With the iPhone camera, what we just showed you, the night mode, it does all that automatically. With the Nightcap app, you need to do it yourself if you want to adjust it manually. So when you start this, it's got different functionality. So there's a little star down the bottom left-hand corner. You touch that, and it gives you 6 or 8 different modes to shoot with. I'll tell you that the star mode on this, I've never had great success out of it because I don't think it shoots for that long. It shoots long enough to abide by the rule of 500 because I think it only shoots for 15 seconds. But again, expectations need to be mindful, and if we shoot for longer, we may get star trails, but we get more light and more stars. So it's a trade-off. You can adjust the ISO and you can adjust the exposure, but I generally just leave it all automatic. I try to shoot with the Nightcap app for between 30 and 35 seconds, roughly. And I think in this video, I've done it for 35 or 36 seconds. But all I've done is go down to the star. I'll start this now. I'll go down to the star down the bottom, touch that. I'll go to the ISS mode, and I'll explain that one in a second, and touch the screen to set the focus, and that's it. Hit the shutter button, and off it goes. There was a timer there that you can turn a timer on for this as well. The ISS mode is similar to, which is International Space Station mode, similar to the long shutter speed mode, or the long exposure mode. Basically, you push the button to start and you push the button to finish again. I find this, if I get to 30 to 35 seconds, I'll just keep an eye on that timer while it's taking this photo, and I'll stop it manually when I'm happy with it. So there's 37, 38, 39 seconds. That was a long one. And here's that photo. So there's definitely star trails in this photo. There's a fair bit of noise in this photo as well. The noise that I've always found, the digital noise, the way that it processes that darker image is better, I think, in the Nightcap app than what it is in the night mode on the regular camera app on an iPhone 11. But the iPhone 11 looks sharper, I think. But anyway, that's how you can do it. If there are other apps, there's definitely other apps around that you can do this with, and this one here costs, can't remember, but it's like $5 maybe. It wasn't an expensive app, but I always recommend people who haven't got an iPhone 11 or something prior to an iPhone 11, this is where you want to kick off and have a go at it if you're keen to do it. I think it captures the stars pretty well. You can certainly see the different constellations that are there. I think it's pretty cool. For those who have an iPhone 12 Pro, so when I talk to people about nighttime photography with your phone, it's in the video. That one get released? It did. The video I've just done with this part of the iPhone. In that video, I talk about how every competitor at the moment, every manufacturer at the moment is competing to see who can do the better thing with the camera, especially with low light stuff. Like everyone's coming out with these low light modes in their phones. And it doesn't matter which side of the camp you sit on. You can sit in the iPhone side or the Android side. It doesn't matter. We win, as in the consumer. We win. When they're competing with each other, we are the ones who wins. And I can tell you that I've got this Apple PRORAW on my 12 Pro Max, and it's absolutely a game changer for Apple in this nighttime space. It's so if you don't know what RAW is, in a nutshell, currently your phone will shoot either HEIC, whatever it is, or JPEGs, and basically that's either the Apple's the high efficiency format or a JPEG. That's it. It's going to take the photo, process it the way it thinks is the right way to do it, and give you an output of that image the best way that the iPhone can do it. With a RAW file, it's literally getting all the information off that sensor and letting you do what you want with that information. That's basically it. As far as the end user is concerned, or you, the user, file size is a big difference. So a regular photo on the iPhone night mode photo is going to be about 3 megabytes, roughly. A RAW file is going to be upwards of 20, so there's a lot more information there. The other downside of RAW shooting is that you must edit the photos. So you can't just take a raw photo and say, print it. It just doesn't work. You need to process it. You can't upload it onto social media. It doesn't work. You need to process it. So you'd process it in one of the apps that we'll talk about in a second and export it as a JPEG. It gives you a lot more power over how that image will look. I haven't talked this long for ages. PRORAW is only available, or it's only available on the 12s, and that is the 12 Pro. So you could have an iPhone 12 mini. This won't work on that. Some people were talking about it going onto the iPhone 11. I haven't seen anything yet that from Apple that says it will. I've only seen stuff from Apple that says it's going to go onto the 12. And it's only in the beta program at this point. So if you've got an iPhone 12 Pro and you want to shoot this RAW, you basically need to sign up or be part of that Apple development program, and you can get the beta version of iOS 14.3, and this is on there. And I've been running this now on mine for a couple of months, and it's incredibly stable. Apple just released 14.3 version 3 3 or 4 days ago, and I haven't seen anything different on my phone with this functionality. So it's there for you if you're going to do this sort of work. And you might wonder, well, why do I even want to do this? Well, that's what it looks like, by the way. That's the only interface difference, is that you've got that little RAW button. This is obviously a screenshot of the top of the camera as you're about to take a photo in night mode. It's got the RAW button there. It's got a line through it, so RAW mode is turned off at this point. You just push that RAW button and that line goes away and you shoot RAW. It doesn't shoot both at the same time. You shoot one or the other. And I think that's a bonus. But the main thing that for nighttime photography is this. Now, this is a screenshot, a zoomed in screenshot of the night mode on the 12 in a JPEG format. And the artifacts that are a direct result of the computational photography that Apple does, it's great that we get stars off a little tiny sensor, but these artifacts that are all over that photo are just horrid. You can't edit them out. You can't use a noise slider and adjust it out. They're always there, and it's always been a bugbear of mine. Now this one here is a RAW file, and you can see that the noise in this, there's a lot more stars in this, but the noise that's in this is more of a traditional sort of a noise, and you can edit that out in Lightroom or in Snapseed. The video that, if you have a look at my YouTube channel, the latest video that I've done there, it shows some pretty good examples of what this can do. I'll put it up against what I would consider to be the powerhouse of astrophotography with mobile phones. And in some of the photos, you can tell that it wasn't the iPhone, it was the other phone. And other photos, you just can't tell that this camera that's been the best astrophoto phone that I've ever seen versus the iPhone, you can't tell the difference. They're that close, you just can't tell. Editing. I'm not going to go through how I edit. I'll talk about it, but I'm not going to go through the process for every individual photo. I've got a couple of videos that are in the burner at the moment that will be uploaded to YouTube in the next 6 weeks, I would say. I'm about a month ahead of where I normally do. But some people have asked for full tutorials of how I edit my astro photos, and that's coming up. But I'll tell you what's available to you, and I'll tell you in broad terms what I generally do with the editing. These are the two apps that I use for pretty much all of my editing. If you're part of, if you've subscribed to the Adobe's Creative Cloud with the photography package, it's a subscription service, so you're paying roughly $15 a month. For me, someone who does professional photography every other day, and I've got clients that I'm shooting for and editing and then selling, it makes sense that I have that package. This is just what I use. There's definitely other things out there. You can get Lightroom right now for free. You just won't necessarily have all the tools, and I think they change from time to time as to what tools you can have. And they're usually the smaller, like brush tools and things like that. What you definitely don't get, though, is the Creative Cloud backup, like the cloud storage that comes with the Adobe Creative Cloud. But I've always used both of these tools. There's only one tool. I could do pretty much everything on Snapseed without Lightroom on my phone, with the exception of one tool. And I really wish that Snapseed had it, but I'll mention that in a second. So you've got Adobe mobile and the desktop, and the other one is Snapseed. Snapseed is owned by Google, and it's free. It's an incredibly powerful tool, Snapseed is. It's just not as intuitive as you would like it to be. The more you use it, the more comfortable you get with it, and you can do some really creative things with Snapseed. When it comes to editing photos, regardless of the genre of photography that you're in, you'll always have people that say you shouldn't be editing photos, you should be getting it right in the camera, blah, 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 blah. And my argument to that is photos have been edited forever. It doesn't matter if it's digital or film, they've been edited forever. There's dodging and burning, some really famous photos that were taken on film, black and white days, and the lines and the scribe marks and the dodging and burning that's happened to these photos to make them the end image that is incredibly popular. Editing has been around forever. I think if you get your head around the editing process, it makes you a better photographer. That's what I tell people, and I think that's pretty accurate. Then I think you get also some hardcore, don't edit it, you're doing it wrong, you're cheating. I tend to think those people just don't know how to do it. But editing, I think, especially for astrophotography, it makes it that much better. You can take a photo that is, really good and make it excellent. That's what I think. These are two photos that have been edited. One of these is, the one. Now I'm not sure if you're going to look at left or right. The one with the water and the dead trees in the foreground. That's an iPhone 12 photo. No, it's wrong. That's an iPhone. Yeah, it is an iPhone 12 photo. And the other one with the road running through it, that's actually a Google Pixel photo. The top two photos are unedited. The bottom ones are the edited. Now, if you have a look at those, the first and foremost thing with the one with the trees and the water, well, it was crooked. It was pretty well dark, and you can't line things up perfectly, so you need to straighten the horizon and things like that. So that's part of the editing process. I've done pretty well the same thing on both of these photos with the noise reduction, with the contrast, with the cropping and so forth. But I think the bottom photos are better than the top photos. And if you disagree, I'm more than happy to have a conversation around that. It's I think editing just makes your photo better. These are the broad brush changes that I make in both of these programs to my editing. Your noise sliders, because you're shooting at such a high ISO, ISO, for those that don't know, it stands for International Standard Organization or something like that. Basically, when you used to buy film, it was a standard that this film was 400 ISO. So every manufacturer had to comply to this standard with the 400 ISO film. It's basically how sensitive, in our case, how sensitive that sensor is to light. So you can make the sensor more sensitive. The downside is that the more sensitive it gets, the more noise gets brought in, that digital noise, like that, the old analog TV signal that wasn't real good and had a bit of grain across it, that sort of thing. In Lightroom, you have a slider to reduce that amount of noise, and it does it really, really well. And that's just noise reduction luminance slider. And in Snapseed, this is one of those things with Snapseed that it's not that intuitive that you would like it to be. It's called the structural slider in Snapseed. And when you go into Snapseed, you go to Tools, go up to Details, and one is Sharpening and one is Structure. Now, I've used Snapseed for years, and I had no idea that Structure was actually a noise reduction tool. I found it purely by accident. I did a video about it a couple of months ago. And it was something that I used to go to the Lightroom for all the time because I didn't know Snapseed did it. So the structure slider in Snapseed, it's the biz. It will help you out with your astrophotography immensely. I do contrast. I always increase contrast on all my astro photos because it makes the stars pop that little bit more. The saturation with all phones, and I haven't found one yet that doesn't do this, they tend to oversaturate the image. So I'll generally bring the saturation down a little bit in pretty much every edited photo from a phone. And then obviously the general cropping and straightening to get it the size that you want. Those 4 things in all of my editing get done, every photo. There are other things that you will do, like maybe some tonal changes with like hue adjustments and luminance in different colors, but that's a bit more specific to different platforms. And like I said, I've just finished shooting a video about editing, so just stay tuned to that channel and you'll see that more in depth because it goes for a fair while. Let's move on. This debate, excuse me. I've been talking for a long time. That's getting cold. The iPhone versus the Android. Now I've been shooting iPhones for a long time. Or I shouldn't say I've been shooting iPhones. I've been using iPhones for a long time. Ever since probably the iPhone 3. And that seems like a long time ago. iPhones, I look at it this way. iPhones just make things easy for you, but they don't necessarily do things perfectly for you. Whereas Androids don't necessarily make things easy for you. You've got to think about things a bit more, but you can get a near to perfect photo out of them. So with those two aside, you can get the best Android phone like Samsung's and the OnePluses and stuff like that who have got some pretty impressive cameras on it. When it comes to astrophotography, I think that sucker there, the Google Pixel, is probably the best. The way that it does its computational photography in its Gcam, which is the app that it uses for its camera, the Google camera, the Gcam, is just exceptional. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second. If you're one of the guys listening to this at the moment who uses an Android to photograph, I would highly recommend you get Gcam installed onto that device because it does really well. But if you can't, and there are a few, well, actually quite a few, to put this into perspective, let's go back to here. This year, well, you got the iPhone 12 mini, 12, 12 Pro, 12 Max, 12 Pro Max. You've got 4 phones that Apple have put out this year. That's 4 phones over this 12-month period. In that same time, these little Androids, there's like 1,000 of these out there. There's that many manufacturers running Android operating system on those devices. So when it comes to things like apps, for example, you might have, Snapseed and Lightroom are across the board. They'll go onto both. But say you've got another app, like RNI Films or things like that. There's lots of different apps to edit photos on the iPhone. And the app developers, they only need to do this for 4 phones that year for Apple, and they're done. And when it comes to Androids, they're looking at hundreds or thousands of phones every year. So you just don't get that continuity of apps through the ages with the Android. You just don't get it. But at the same time, you can have apps that exist on the iPhone and exist on the Android. PhotoPills is a perfect example. It's a very good app. It works across both platforms, but you need to pay for it on this one and you need to pay for it on this one because the developers need to do equal amount of work to work on both devices. So that's certainly something to consider if you're considering jumping from one camp to the other. The support, ongoing support, is possibly not as strong with the Androids, possibly, because you're dealing with many devices versus 4. That's just my thoughts on that. If you're shooting Androids and you're shooting this, say you've got a Samsung, and you have Pro mode on those cameras, on many cameras, these are the considerations that you need to be mindful of. In manual mode, you've got the ISO, and the ISO is that noise I was talking about before. And what I found, even with DSLR photography, I could have 5 students, all with exactly the same camera, all shooting exactly the same lenses, same duration, shooting up at the night sky. This one's using ISO 1600. This one's using ISO 3200. This one's using 1600. And these two are different. So you can have exactly the same camera with exactly the same settings, but that sensor might have been worked a little bit hard. It might have been a Friday afternoon made sensor, and the assembly worker was ready to go for a beer. It may not be quite as good as this one. So every phone, every sensor is going to be slightly different. So you need to find that number that's perfect for your camera, that you're happy with in those conditions, and maintain that sort of ISO number throughout your shooting, and it'll just work better for you that way. With the aperture is done through software on most phones. There's a few phones around that do this. It still has a mechanical aperture, like the fins come in, which is just crazy for a phone. It probably doesn't do much else very good, but that's kind of cool. So be mindful of that aperture. The wider the aperture, the more light that comes in, and the shutter speed. So the shutter speed, what I was talking about before with that rule of 500, once we're finished here, go and Google the rule of 500. There's a whole table and things, but if you've got just a calculator on your phone, work out what the equivalent focal length is for the lens that you're using on that phone. Like the 12 has 3 lenses, so you need to work out what the focal length is for each one of those that you're shooting with. And depending on which one you're shooting with, apply that to the rule. So if it's 26 mil, it's 500 divided by 26, and you'll end up with 19 or 20 seconds, and that's how long you set that shutter speed for, and it'll work just fine for you. Many of the Android phones will work in RAW. We'll give you a RAW file, export a RAW file, and if you have that availability and you have enough storage on that device, absolutely go RAW. Gcam. So Gcam is that Google camera, and it works on many Android devices, but not all. Like I said, there's hundreds, if not thousands, that are made each and every year. Like, people are contacting me on YouTube and other platforms saying, you should do a review on this phone. I've never even heard of that brand. Someone contacted me and said, can you do a video on the Realme phones? I've never heard of that. And I went and Googled it, and they actually look like pretty cool phones, and the specs on them are amazing. So there's all these different manufacturers that seem to be popping up every other day. But the Gcam app will work on many, but not all. But like I said, there's a list on, well, actually there's a lot of lists on the internet to show you where it will work and where it won't. The thing with the Google Play Store is when you log into that, depending on the version of Android that you're running, as you look at an app, it'll actually tell you if it's going to work on that device that you have or not. So if you can get it and you're shooting Androids, definitely get it. It'll open your eyes up to what this thing can do. The way that it does it, so the iPhone shoots for, say, 30 seconds. You can set most of the Android phones to shoot for 30 seconds. What this will do, it will shoot for 4 minutes and 4 seconds. It's the longest I've had it shoot for. It's 4 minutes and 4 seconds. And what it does, it takes a 15 or 16 second exposure 15 or 16 times. And then the software in the in this app, it lines up all the stars, so it basically eliminates all the noise and punches them all together and outputs one file, one JPEG, or JPEGs are quite good to do it for this phone, virtually without any star trails, with virtually no noise. It's just amazing. The downside of it, it takes 4 minutes. The upside of it is that the photo that you're looking at right now, there's been no editing on that. That's straight out of the camera right there. And that's how it looks. And that was obviously a lot of moonlight. You look at the ground on that photo, there's a fair bit of moonlight out there, even a little bit of cloud. That's pretty amazing to get that sort of an image with a foreground element, with that telegraph pole and the stars, and it's all focused. That's just amazing. And I've got a feeling that's all. It is all.
Shane, there's a list of questions that are built up. Can you see those on your screen?
No, I had a whole screen going on. Let's go. Where do I find them?
It's on the right-hand side to the right of the double profile. Looks like a cartoon text bubble. Right-hand side of your screen.
Up there. Yeah. Oh. What do you recommend from Going from phone screen to computer screen.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Shane. It's always kind of challenging for me anyway to go from what I see on a phone or what I see on a computer and then get a nice print out of it. Is there anything unique there with a phone?
No. If you're going to edit photos on your computer, definitely calibrate your monitor. If you're going to be someone who prints a lot, in saying that, the print quality that you're going to get from a phone, this is the biggest downside of printing from a phone. Is the biggest downside of taking photos with your phone is the print size that you can have. And for most, don't worry about megapixels; they're kind of irrelevant when it comes to this. It's the sensor size that's very relevant. If you're shooting, say, an iPhone, I wouldn't print that any larger than, say, an A4. Anything larger than that, you're going to lose quality in that. If you're doing your editing on a phone on a computer, you definitely want to calibrate that monitor if it's a concern to you.
Shane, do you use a particular profiler? I use X-Rite. It's a Pantone product.
Yeah, that works. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So I used to do a fair bit of this when I was working for Xerox and Canon with the RIP systems on the printing. But yeah, that works just fine. What else we got here? Torches. Is there a color? No, just white torch. This is an LED torch, this one here that I'm using. You don't need to change the temperature of that torch. By all means, you can throw gels on the front of that and change the color if you wanted to. But yeah, I've never been too fussed about it. The stuff that I put in those train carriages, you might have seen that was a warmer sort of a light, and they had the gels over the top of that, the sun white balance, like the warmer gels. Does that answer your question, whoever that was?
Yeah, and also, how long, you mentioned like a second and a half, is that correct? That you light, you said you wave your iPhone torch on the subject for a second and a half? Yeah,
so that was for that photo. And what I found with the iPhone photos, look, they're taking, so most of you guys shooting iPhones?
Yeah.
Yep. It's only 30 seconds. So take a series of photos and work out which one works for you the best. Every environment that you're in is going to be lighter or darker than the previous one. Every surface that you shine a light onto is going to have a different reflection element to every other subject that you've shot. So you might find that 1.5 seconds is totally fine. You might find that it's too long. You might find that, and when I do it, can you guys actually see me or not? I can't tell. Yeah?
Yeah.
You can? So can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep. So if I'm shooting that right now and the camera's taking a photo right now, that would be it.
Okay. Thank you.
If you stop presenting, we'll have the full screen where you can show and see you. There we go.
Do I ever combine? Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually a video that I'm working on right now, Paul, with that combining multiple images. So when I did the latest video that was released with the RAW versus the Pixel, there was quite a few people who said, "Oh, you're wrong. The Pixel's great. It does this. It does this." And I think that the best comparison that I could possibly do is a series of 15 photos with the iPhone at 15 seconds and then stack them and then put them against the Pixel phone. But you can absolutely do it. If you're using a Windows machine, I'll send you an email after with where these programs are. There's a free program that you can use for Windows. I'm not a Windows person. And Sequitur, I think it's called. And there's a paid program that you can use for Apple. It's about $60. And it does it really well as well. But I think then I start getting away from the thing I like about taking photos with phones is that it's easy, and you don't need to think too much about rules of 500s and things like this. You don't need to think about it too hard. But when you start saying let's stack them all, you may as well go and get a camera. we're getting away from the ease and the simplicity of the phone, I think. I think the phone is a nice way to introduce yourself to this sort of photography. But you can absolutely stack those images. Can you use Nightcap app with 12 Max? Yes, you can. I've done that just recently with star trail photography. Time-lapse, I should say. Time-lapse photography. And the time-lapse that the iPhone 12 Pro does, they call it night lapse, and it does it automatically. It just goes into it for you. You don't see anything different. It just does star time lapses reasonably well. But I'll say that the Nightcap app on the iPhone 12 does it better. Could I read the question? Why didn't you read the questions to me?
Well, you got through them all already. You did just great. Thank you.
Hey, Shane, one more question. Back on the torch, I guess, excuse the dumb question, are you just saying a flashlight, or is this a special thing that you're using to light?
Yeah, it's a flashlight, I suppose.
Okay, just a LED kind of light source.
Yeah, so this one I'll send when I send this email. I'll put a link to this one as well. It's a Cree light, so like it's fairly bright. But any torch that you can use that's adjustable in its power, it's just easier to adjust the power of this than what it is to manipulate the phone to be brighter or less.
Okay, thank you. I guess on the rule of 500 to try to defeat that 30-second rule, I mean, you could just put a hat over the camera at 20 seconds or something, right?
Oh, you can actually stop it. Sorry, I should have said that. I must have missed that. You can stop it. So as you're taking that nighttime photo, that night mode photo on an iPhone, the button turns to like a record button. So as it's counting down, you can actually stop that yourself. The difference in the photo is pretty remarkable. It's a lot. You're missing stars. I think as the time goes on longer in that 30 seconds, it's picking up more stars. But it also avoids the star trails. I think if I was the stacking of images, I've taken a heap with the night mode in the camera app, as well as there's a couple of other apps that I've been trying. Cortex Cam, it's called. One of the people watching one of my videos, and I've been playing with this thing. I'm not going to tell you it's great, but it does something similar to what the Gcam does, as in takes multiple photos and stacks them together. I've shot probably 25 photos with this so far, and only had one that was, I thought, hey, that's a good photo. The rest of them are kind of blurry and the stars don't focus right. It's got potential. I'm just probably not using it right yet. Any more?
So why are you a Red Sox fan?
I'm not.
You wore that even in your you wore that in your things. What's
So obviously I have
an audience, right?
So I wear hats all the time. I kind of collect hats, and when I, especially now that the channel, my YouTube channel, is gaining a lot more momentum, we do what's called batch recording. So I'll record like 3 or 4 videos at once, and the way that the viewer, as in you guys watching it, can, well, I'll just change the hat and put another one on, and as far as you're concerned, it's a different day. So it just makes my workflow easier. But yeah, I used to play baseball here when I was a kid. Baseball in Australia is there's not much of it. We're mainly cricket and football. But I used to play baseball when I was a kid, so I've kind of kept the hats going throughout my life. I would have probably 50 or so hats, I suppose. And so, what's the baseball team in where you guys are?
I'm from Chicago, so I follow Chicago teams, but I'm living 900 miles away. Hey, I have another more serious question.
Yes.
The area you live is a mecca for astrophotography, but most of our geographic knowledge of Australia is probably pretty abysmal. Could you send us a map or something of where you live? You know, I don't mean exact location so we don't harass you, but I mean just the general area of Australia that you're talking about.
It's kind of the southeast corner, isn't it?
Yeah, it's down the southeast corner. That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
New South Wales, right?
Victoria.
Victoria. Okay.
Yeah. There was a video that I did where I used Google Earth, and I started where I was, and I zoomed right out so you could see roughly where I was. I'm just trying to think what video that was. I'll send it in a link as well, and you can see. But basically, it's down the southeast of the country. But you know, I'm a good 3 hours drive from any coast, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
If I drive maybe an hour and a half north, I'll be in the desert. There's nothing there. Yeah. Any more? Oh, right there. We've got more.
Yes. Shane, I've got a question on something called Pro Camera. It's an app by Ecologics, a German company. This app's been out for about 10 years, and you buy it for $7.99. They have some in-app purchases. Well, there's a Low Light Plus, HDR, several others. I got that app because I have an iPhone 10.
Yep.
And it's called Pro Camera, all one word. There are a lot of things that say Pro on it and Camera on it. But what is your take on the Low Light Plus feature, or this app in general for kind of photography?
Well, I think that you've got ProCam, you've got Halide or Halide, depending on where you are in the world and how you pronounce that. They're very similar apps, as in they can shoot some high resolution things with, you can output RAW from them as well. But I'm yet to find anything, including that ProCam, that shoots for longer than 1 second.
Mm.
The 1 second is the killer for all those apps. You need to shoot for plus the 15 seconds for this sort of photography.
Okay, Pro Camera Plus, you can shoot for 20 or 30 seconds. It will shoot in RAW as well. And it has a stacking feature.
Say that again, sorry?
It has a stacking feature that's built into it.
Oh, I'm not familiar with him. Pro Camera Plus.
Pro Camera Low Light Plus. And that is within the Pro Camera app.
Oh,
$7.99. There's some in-app purchases. One is HDR. Another one is the Low Light Plus.
Okay. I'll have to have a look at it. I'm not familiar with it, to be honest.
Yeah, check it out and see if it's any good and let us know.
Yeah, thanks. I'll have a look. Any more?
Shane, we thank you for your time. It's been great. Learned a lot and got a lot of tips. And you were the inaugural speaker for our SIG here, so we're pleased, and we'll remember you forever for that. Okay. And do send us the link for your how to subscribe to your YouTube channel. I'm sure the people here would like to follow you on that also.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll send you a link later on with. I've written a list here of the things that I need to send you, so that you can share it with everybody there. Yeah. So I'll send it to you today.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll send it out on our listserv. Okay.
Yeah, Shane, thank you so much. It was fantastic. You know, we want to do more of these, and this was really a great. And it was right at the right level, I think, for our folks. So we really appreciate you know, spending part of your morning with us there.
No worries at all. Enjoyed it.
We might invite you back sometime.
Okay. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, if you'll unmute your microphones, we'll give Shane a virtual applause.
All right.
Okay. Hold on. Let me take a photo of you guys. There you go.
There you go. Australia to Washington, D.C. That's terrific. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks,
No
Shane.
worries. I'll see you later.
Okay, goodbye.